When you're alone on the road, sometimes the person who stops to help isn't human. Story 1. The highway stretched out, a shimmering ribbon under the relentless August sun. My thumb felt raw, my throat parched. I'd been out here for 3 hours, the heat radiating off the asphalt in waves, distorting the distant, blurry shapes of passing cars. My car had died a spectacular death 10 miles back, sputtering and wheezing before giving up the ghost with a final, dramatic shudder. Now, stranded in the middle of nowhere, with only a half-empty water bottle and a rapidly dwindling sense of optimism, I was a sitting duck. Finally, a beat-up blue pickup truck slowed, the driver leaning over to squint at me. He had a friendly face, weathered and kind, with a shock of graying hair. He pulled over, the passenger door creaking open. "Where you headed, son?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "North, as far as you're going," I replied, gratefully tossing my backpack onto the floor. The cab smelled faintly of pine and something else, something metallic, like old pennies. "Hop on in," he said, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Name's Earl." "Thanks, Earl." "I'm Ben." The first hour was uneventful. Earl was easy to talk to, spinning tales of his life as a farmer, the changing seasons, the struggles of making a living from the land. I found myself relaxing, the dread of my predicament slowly receding. He didn't pry into my own story, which I appreciated. We spoke of trivial things, the weather, the sparse landscape, the occasional hawk circling overhead. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Then, a subtle shift. Earl's tone changed, becoming more introspective, almost mournful. He started talking about people, not in general, but specific people. People who had disappeared. He'd recount these stories with a strange detachment, as if he were reading from a newspaper article he'd skimmed. He'd mention a young woman who'd vanished from a nearby town years ago, a drifter seen on this very stretch of road, a family who'd moved away without a trace. Each story was delivered in a matter-of-fact way, yet there was an undercurrent of something unsettling, a morbid fascination. "People just go sometimes," he'd say, his gaze fixed on the darkening road. "They just up and vanish, like smoke." I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he'd always loop back to the same theme. The metallic smell in the cab seemed to intensify, and I noticed a dark stain on the passenger seat, partially hidden by a folded blanket. My earlier unease began to resurface, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. "You got any family, Ben?" Earl asked, his voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the silence. The question hung in the air, loaded with an unspoken weight. "Yeah, parents," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're back home." Earl chuckled, a low, guttural sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Home. That's a funny thing. Some people, they don't have a home to go back to. Or maybe their home just changed." He took a sharp turn down a narrow, unpaved road, the truck bumping along erratically. The trees on either side pressed in, their branches clawing at the twilight. Panic began to bloom in my chest. "Earl, where are we going? I thought you were heading north on the highway." He didn't answer immediately. He just kept driving, faster now, the headlights slicing through the encroaching darkness. The metallic smell was overwhelming. I could see it glinting on the dashboard now, faint red streaks mixed with dust. Finally, he spoke, his voice a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, I am heading north, Ben. Just taking a little detour. A shortcut. You see, sometimes, the quickest way home is the one you don't expect." He glanced at me, and in the dim light, his eyes seemed impossibly dark, like bottomless wells. And then I saw it, reflected in the rearview mirror, a glint of metal from the glove compartment, and the unmistakable shape of a shovel buckle. The metallic smell, I realized with a sickening lurch, wasn't pennies. It was iron. Story 2. The Last Ride. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon when I stuck my thumb out on the empty stretch of Route 17. My phone was dead, my legs ached, and the cold was starting to bite. I'd promised myself I'd never hitchhike again, but desperation had a way of making fools out of principled men. Then, headlights cut through the dark. The car rolled to a stop, an old sedan, paint dull under the moon. The driver didn't speak, just nodded toward the passenger seat. I hesitated. Something about the way the interior light glowed faintly red made my skin prickle. But the wind howled, and I climbed in. "Thanks," I said, rubbing my hands together. No answer. The driver was a man in his 40s, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under his eyes. His fingers tapped the steering wheel in a rhythm that wasn't music, just counting. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. I glanced at the back seat. Empty, but the upholstery was stained in patches, dark and uneven. The smell hit me then. Rotten meat, coppery, thick. "You hunt?" I asked, forcing lightness into my voice. His lips twitched. Not a smile. Something worse. The radio hissed static, and he reached over, slow, deliberate, to turn it up. The sound filled the car, pressing against my ears like a swarm of insects. I clutched my backpack. "You mind if we—" "Quiet," he murmured. The road ahead vanished into black. No streetlights, no other cars. Just us and that endless dark. Then, the first sign. A broken-down wagon, half off the shoulder, its wheels gone. The driver didn't slow, didn't react. But his fingers stopped tapping. The second sign was the hitchhiker. A figure stood under a dead tree, arm raised, pale-faced, lips cracked, eyes wide and glassy. My breath caught. "We should—" The driver stepped on the gas. The figure's head turned, tracking us as we blew past. That's when I saw it. The way the driver's reflection wasn't moving in the rear view. His mouth stretched. Wider. Wider. The radio screeched, and in the static, a voice whispered, "He's not stopping for you either." I lunged for the door. Locked. Outside, another hitchhiker. Another. Dozens of them now, lining the road, all staring, all waiting. The driver exhaled, a wet, rattling sound. And then I understood. This wasn't a ride out. It was the last one in. Story 3. The desert air was thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. Dusk was painting the sky in bruised purples and smudged oranges, and the highway stretched out, a silent, empty ribbon of cracked asphalt. My thumb, stubbornly unconveiling, felt numb. It had been hours. My water bottle was perilously low, the last vestiges of a weak, lukewarm drink. Every car that passed was a brief flicker of hope, extinguished by the indifferent roar of its engine. Then, a beat-up pickup truck, a relic from another decade, slowed its descent towards me. The driver was a man of indeterminate age, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched into leathery skin. He had a long, unkempt beard that obscured most of his chin, and his eyes, small and dark, seemed to hold a peculiar, almost reptilian stillness. He didn't offer a smile, just a curt nod and a gesture towards the passenger door. "Where you headed?" His voice rasped, like loose gravel. "North," I managed, my throat dry. "As far as you're going." I didn't care, not really. Anywhere was better than out here. He grunted, and I clambered in, the worn vinyl seat sticking to my skin. The cab smelled of stale smoke and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. He pulled back onto the highway, the truck lurching with an uneven rhythm. Silence settled between us, broken only by the drone of the engine and the occasional click and wheeze from the dashboard. I tried to make conversation. "Long stretch out here, huh?" He didn't look at me. "It all is." His brevity was unsettling, but I attributed it to the solitude of the desert. "People get strange out here," I told myself. I stared out the window, the landscape blurring into a monotonous expanse of scrub and rock. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into an inky blackness. The only light now came from the truck's dim headlights, carving a narrow path through the oppressive dark. A few miles later, he reached over and flicked on the radio. Static crackled for a moment, then resolved into a low, humming melody, discordant and unsettling. It sounded like a chant, ancient and mournful. He turned it up. "Don't you like it?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the drone. "It's interesting," I lied, a shiver tracing its way down my spine. I wanted to ask him to turn it off, but the words caught in my throat. His eyes, in the dim glow of the dashboard, had a disturbing glint. He started humming along, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the metal of the truck. Then, he began to tap his fingers on the steering wheel, a slow, deliberate rhythm that matched the unsettling music. It wasn't a casual tap, it was a percussive insistence. Suddenly he swerved, the truck fishtailing slightly. I yelped, grabbing the dashboard. "Whoa, what was that?" He didn't answer, just kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his humming growing louder. The tapping became more frantic. I stole a glance at his hands. They were unnaturally long, the fingers bent at odd angles. And the nails, they were yellowed and thick, like talons. My heart began to pound against my ribs. I looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were no longer just still, they were predatory. And as he turned his head slightly, I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmering around him, like heat haze rising from the asphalt. "Where?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Are we actually going?" He stopped humming. The music cut out abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. He finally turned his head, and his mouth stretched into a wide, slack grin, revealing rows of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. "To a place," he rasped, and the sweet metallic smell in the cab intensified, "where the roads never end, and neither does the thirst."